ncIMPACT is made possible by funding from Civic Federal Credit Union. ncIMPACT is a production of UNC-TV Public Media North Carolina in association with the University of North Carolina School of Government.
And I was forced to do unthinkable things.
They look like people you pass on the street every day.
It will crush you and it will break you to understand the brutal violence that they're experiencing.
We have to change our culture, a culture that says it's okay for cheap goods and cheap sex.
If you're going to stand up for anything, men should be standing up for this and saying no more.
Education, jobs, health, all these issues affect you. Leaders from across the state, people just like you, are working to make things better. The question is, could you do this in your community as well? I'm Anita Brown-Graham. This is ncIMPACT. Human trafficking. You may not think it's an issue where you live, but the reality is this atrocity is occurring at an alarming rate across our state. North Carolina is among the top 10 states in the number of trafficking reports. Thankfully, there are communities taking steps to combat sex and labor trafficking. Let's look at the impact of how communities in the Triad are shining a light on this issue, one that is often hiding in plain sight.
When I was working in a movie theater in high school in Greensboro, North Carolina, I met a 40-year-old man who was a projectionist at the theater. We began an intimate relationship. He became my boyfriend. I eventually got kicked out of my house for bad behavior, and I moved in with him because he's like, you know, we're already dating, you could live with me. After living there a few months, he asked me to be a part of his art project. He was like, you could be my #1 model. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll be your #1 model. So the pictures were more innocent in the beginning, and then they became more sexual, and I was forced to do unthinkable things. He did drugs. There was times I'd wake up, I didn't know what had happened to me, and I'd be naked on the kitchen floor. He's like, oh, you were just sleepwalking, and I believed him. My chains were invisible, but they were so strong, and they were so long-lasting. There's this huge misconception with human trafficking that you're taken somewhere. It looks different. There's so many different faces, which means we have to work harder than what we're already doing.
This is a crime that knows no boundaries or barriers, has no classifications. It is simply that you are vulnerable and someone came along to take advantage of that vulnerability.
The stories that I hear, I mean, sometimes it just breaks my heart. They withhold food from them. They have no problems beating them up, locking them in closets. You just wouldn't believe some of the things that we've heard from the clients that we've worked with.
But the key thing is that we cannot eliminate human trafficking alone. We need each other.
Sex trafficking. When was the first time you heard that term?
The first time that I had any exposure with sex trafficking was in 2013. I was the supervisor of the Major Crimes Unit in Cumberland County, and we had noticed a large increase in the crimes around our hotels, around our local hotels, in interviewing the suspects and interviewing the victims and interviewing all the people related to it. We learned about a website called Backpage.com. Backpage.com at that time was a website very similar to Craigslist that was nationwide. In fact, it was worldwide. However, the vast majority of ads on Craigslist, the vast majority were devoted to prostitution, devoted to body rubs or massage, including a dominatrix, that kind of thing. But it was almost all prostitution. They did have other services as well. You could advertise your lawnmower, but the vast majority of Backpage was for prostitution-related activity.
So Talk a little bit more about the kind of prevention
Yes, ma'am.
activities you're engaged in.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Ounce of prevention. So we, through Five Sparrows, the Sheriff's Office and the Police Department, and now the Prosecutor's Office as well, we do community events where we educate the public, just as I've been saying. During those, we discuss things just like cell phone prevention, cell phone awareness. I had a case very recently where they used a Whisper app. Whisper is an app that you don't, unlike Facebook where you have to sign in with a username and an email and a phone number and provide personal data. Whisper, you download it from your iTunes account or you download it from your Play Store, and it automatically fills in a character for you. You don't have to provide any information other than your location, which is very troubling for us. And we had a case from that literally last week. This is not a victimless crime. Very often someone will say to me, well, they're just prostitutes, though those people want to do it. Well, this is not a victimless crime. I have investigated hundreds of these cases. I have interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people. And although they may have an ad that says, I love my job, every single person that I have spoken to about this issue, every single one, not one single person has said, I like my clients. Not one single person has said, I like what I do, when you actually speak to them about it. They loathe their clients. This is not a victimless crime.
North Carolina lies at the crossroads of several major interstates. These highways often help facilitate human trafficking. Let's look at the impact of groups in the Triad who are keeping an eye on the interstates and targeting those who purchase people for sex.
A huge portion of the demand for having sex with sex trafficking victims are truck drivers. Truck stops, rest areas, anywhere these trucks are forced apart for 10 hours a day, the pimps, traffickers, handlers can find them and will bring the girls to them. It's the only industry in America where the traffickers are actually bringing the girls to the customer and delivering them just like a pizza. We stepped in to educate truckers to exactly what they're paying for, which is simply non-consensual sex. We educate the truckers that the girls get zero of the money, that they are being brought here against their will, and even though they're knocking on the doors, going door to door to door, from truck to truck to truck, and even though they have a smile on their face, and they come with a really good deceptive lie and a story to get into those trucks, the reality is it's non-consensual, and they're not there of their own free will.
The traffickers are highly mobile, so a lot of times it does cross jurisdiction. So we'll work with, other local law enforcement.
That's the biggest thing I learned, is the misperception, how wrong we are with what people think a trafficking victim looks like. It's been here. We're just now realizing the signs and addressing it now sooner than we were before. Victims of trafficking, sex or labor trafficking, rarely self-report. It takes people paying attention to bring it to our attention so that we can address this problem, and again, through awareness, move towards putting an end to this.
While truck drivers make up a large amount of the demand to have sex with these girls, I would tell you truck drivers are some of the best people in the world. They have good hearts, they want to help, they're hardworking. So the more educating you can do, the better off it is for everybody. It's lowering the demand, but it's also creating an army.
The signs aren't always clear. Margaret, let's start at the beginning. What is human trafficking?
Human trafficking takes many different forms, and it can involve sex or labor trafficking. But in essence, what it means is one person is making money off another person for either work or sex acts. So it's pretty reprehensible, and unfortunately, it's way more common than most of us realize.
People are going to be interested in the signs of human trafficking. Help us think through what are some of the common signs.
Okay. One thing to keep in mind is that there is a controlling third party in the picture somewhere. And it may well be that third party wants to keep your identification papers, or keep your money, or keep you under tight observation. The victims themselves, depending on which kind of business model the trafficker is using, can show a range of indicators, but generally there may be some sense of that person being uncomfortable, unwilling to make eye contact, uncertain about where they are, or even what day it is or what month it is. They may have identifying tattoos, which are gang indicators. They may be victims of other kinds of physical abuse. So people who work in clinic settings may see bruising or that kind of thing. The same person may be in for repeat treatments of sexually transmitted diseases or repeat pregnancies. Farm workers, again, may demonstrate the injuries, something that could have been taken care of a long time ago but wasn't because no one would take them to a medical service. One of the better stories, I think, comes from a member of the North Carolina Human Trafficking Commission who was a retired highway patrol officer. And he said, like a lot of professionals say, is, oh, we've been seeing this for years, but we didn't know we were seeing it. And he would tell the story of stopping a van or station wagon for speeding, and in the front seat would be a couple who don't appear to be related, and in the back would be several young women who are also not related. And the young women might be wearing clothes that are inappropriate for the weather. They may not have their identification papers. They may not be able to explain exactly or use the same story about who they are or where they're going or where they are in this moment. The young women might be carrying multiple phones or hotel key cards.
And how common is way more common if people are trying to get their head around the prevalence of this?
Yes, it's really difficult too because people want those hard numbers, and the fact is we really don't have the best data yet. Our eyes have really been open to human trafficking only in the last couple of decades, and in North Carolina really only probably in the last 5 or 10 years. So what we can tell you is that certain entities are good at collecting data. So like the Cumberland County Sheriff's Department has some pretty good data. The Project No Rest pilot sites have some pretty good data. And just to give you an example of that, there were 5 pilot sites across the state, and in 18 months of operation ending last fall, they talked with about 400 individuals, and of those, 300 in these 5 different communities were suspected or confirmed victims of human trafficking. And we need more folks with that focused lens, looking at their communities to see where trafficking happens and figuring out how to intervene.
Along with sex trafficking, labor trafficking is a prevalent issue across our state. People all over the state are forced into jobs against their will. Let's look at the impact of how Triad organizations are fighting labor trafficking and giving hope to survivors. But I wonder if we could start with your story of when you got to the United States. Can you tell me when you got here?
I get here in near the August 2013 because something happened in my country, and I hoped I can go to a place can have a freedom choices and a equal life. I work as a waitress in a Chinese restaurant. Then I get to know a regular customer. Then it turned out this person has a massage business. He was trying to say, I think you are smart, you deserve to have a better job than a waitress. And if you don't understand anything, I can teach you. He sat me down, this person sat me down in an apartment. He said, do not go outside, do not talk with anybody near the neighborhood. I didn't understand the job. I just felt it was weird. That's not the freedom I was thinking.
Knowing what human trafficking is, it's force, fraud, and coercion, where someone feels that they aren't able to get out of the situation because something will happen, or they've been told that they can't leave because they owe debt.
World Relief came in, that helps a lot. I started trusting Rachel. She cared about me not only because she worked for World Relief, she cared about me as a person.
Trafficking human beings for labor. Nancy, this is a topic you've spent some time working on. Give us some sense of what does that look like on the ground?
It looks murky on the ground. We are all consumers, and we are all engaged in supply chains where someone produces a product that I purchase or I borrow, or perhaps I'm a producer. We often don't know or have no idea the source of the product that we're purchasing. We don't think about it. We think about getting a good price in the grocery store, in the market, for our clothing. It never occurs to us that we may be complicit, if you will, in a labor supply chain that is abusive. Polaris Project operates a national human trafficking hotline, and they're one of the primary sources of data around both labor and sex trafficking in the United States. In 2017, they received 221 phone calls from North Carolina. Now, those calls could mean that someone was seeking information about a labor trafficking issue, or they could be reporting a suspicion. It could be an individual who suspected that they were being trafficked. Of those calls, 51 regarded labor, 16 involved perhaps sex and labor.
Okay.
Those calls came from a variety of industries. Polaris also has used the data that they've collected over the years from these calls from across the country to identify 25 business models of trafficking. They include such things as individuals who are here on temporary guest worker visas, on roadside begging, carnival work, health and beauty. In effect, it cuts across all industries. In North Carolina, it will look different in every locale. North Carolina is located geographically in the middle of the United States. So we have access north and south. Our roadways run west. We have a lot of tourism. We have lots of, we know that North Carolina has grown by leaps and bounds, so we have a somewhat, at least initially, transient population that comes in, people either moving to the state or coming here to vacation. Our military population, agriculture is a huge industry. So in other words, the fabric of our economy is such that there are many points of entry for trafficking in this state.
How much better situated are North Carolina's communities to respond to this kind of circumstance?
Many, many non-governmental agencies, local government, faith-based organizations, and different entities, our law enforcement, DA's offices are coming together to realize that this is an insidious problem, and it's only going to be effectively addressed when we come together.
We all share many of the same challenges in our communities, so why not share the solutions as well? Each and every one of us can make a difference. That's what having an impact is all about.
ncIMPACT is made possible by funding from Civic Federal Credit Union. ncIMPACT is a production of UNC-TV Public Media North Carolina in association with the University of North Carolina's School of Government.